Hey there, so glad you're joining us. Today we're diving into a fascinating explainer that literally flips the script on how we understand our stress, our daily habits, and honestly, even our own identities. We're going to be unpacking the true biological cost of something called emotional debt. If you're someone who constantly feels like you're stuck on a treadmill you just can't step off of, well, this breakdown is going to be absolutely eye-opening for you.
So let me ask you a really direct question. Why can't you relax? Seriously, think about it. Why is it that when the weekend finally rolls around or you finally go on that vacation you've been saving up for forever, just sitting in silence fills you with this absolute sense of dread instead of, actual rest? We usually just brush this off, right? We say, oh, I'm just an ambitious, busy person. But what if your inability to sit still has literally nothing to do with ambition? What if it's actually an active avoidance of something much, much deeper?
Okay, let's dive into this, because there's a concept from our source material that pretty much changes everything. Get this. This thing that we all call personality is usually just a collection of unpaid invoices from childhood. Just let that sink in for a second. According to the source, that impatience you've always thought was just your temperament, or maybe that undeniable need to constantly be the funniest person in the room, they aren't actually innate personality traits. Nope, they're bills you haven't paid. They are avoidance strategies built entirely around an old unclosed tab in your nervous system.
To really grasp this, we need to look at the core premise here, which is emotional debt. The source defines this as unprocessed emotional events that turn into a literal line of credit. A line of credit that your nervous system is silently paying interest on every single day. And I want to be super clear here. This isn't just some clever, poetic metaphor you'd hear at a wellness retreat. As the explainer lays out, this is the actual biological math your body is doing. Every single time you choked down grief or smiled through rage or just said I'm fine when your chest was practically on fire, that energy didn't just evaporate into thin air. It was stored.
Right, so how exactly is it stored? Well, there's a massive distinction we have to make here. Remembering versus re-entering. When a perceived threat happens and your natural response gets interrupted, like say you couldn't fight back or you couldn't run away, that mobilized fight-or-flight energy stays physically lodged in subcortical structures, places like the amygdala, the brainstem, and the body itself. The absolutely crucial thing to understand is that these are not stored as memories you just recall, like thinking about what you had for breakfast. They're stored as incomplete physical states that you actually re-enter. That's exactly why a 45-year-old can be sitting in a calm boardroom, hear a slightly raised voice, and suddenly their hands are shaking like they're 7 years old all over again. It is not a memory. It's the nervous system literally replaying a physiological state.
And over time, this emotional debt compounds. The biological cost is, frankly, intense. Let's break down the math your body's doing. First off, your amygdala, which is your brain's emotion center, becomes hypersensitized. It starts taking less and less to trigger you. Secondly, you get a reduced engagement of your prefrontal cortex. That basically means you lose your executive function. You become way more impulsive and a lot less reflective. The amygdala essentially just hijacks the whole show. And third, you develop a chronically activated HPA axis, meaning your stress response system gets jammed in the on position, constantly pumping out elevated levels of cortisol. This compound interest takes a very literal, very physical toll. Chronically elevated cortisol doesn't just make you feel a little stressed out, it acts like a complete wrecking ball inside you. It actively suppresses your immune system, it ruins the delicate architecture of your sleep, it hinders your brain's ability to consolidate memories, and, maybe wildest of all, it increases visceral fat, which sets off a whole biological cascade that scientists call accelerated cellular aging, which, let's be real, is essentially just a polite scientific way of saying dying faster. The source actually points out that living with this kind of unchecked emotional debt ages you and can make you sick at the exact same speed as smoking cigarettes. Crazy, right? So because this compounding interest is so incredibly dangerous, our biological system urgently drafts our other behaviors into a sort of payment plan. Unprocessed emotions, they don't just stay isolated. To keep this massive debt from defaulting, people generally make what we can think of as minimum payments using 4 common strategies: numbing, performing, relational overfunctioning, and self-medicating. Now, it's important to note that these behaviors don't actually reduce the principal debt one bit. They just keep your head above water for today.
Let's look a little closer at numbing, for example. We're talking about scrolling endlessly on your phone, binge-watching TV for hours, or maybe overeating. We are so quick to beat ourselves up over this, thinking, ugh, I just need more discipline. But the source reframes this so beautifully. Numbing isn't a lack of discipline at all. It is actually a highly successful short-term debt management strategy. We do it because feeling absolutely nothing, whether through a screen or a substance, is way, way cheaper than feeling the overwhelming weight of everything we owe to our nervous system. It works, and that is exactly why it is so incredibly hard to stop.
Then there is relational overfunctioning. Now, this one can be pretty tough to confront. This is the person who constantly bends over backwards, sacrifices everything, and tries to anticipate every single need of their partner before they even ask. We almost always mistake this for deep, selfless love. But honestly, often it's just debt servicing. The explainer highlights that if you grew up in an environment where love came tied to anxiety, you're going to feel most alive around people who make you anxious. You're simply recreating familiar, stressful conditions to service an old debt, often walking right past the healthy people who could actually offer you peace.
And the interest rate on making these daily payments? It is absolutely staggering. Imagine a 27% APR credit card, but instead of money, the interest is paid in loneliness. And we're not talking about the loneliness of just sitting alone in an empty room. The source describes the most expensive, high-interest kind of loneliness as the kind where you are completely surrounded by people, yet not a single one of them truly knows who you are. You are entirely hidden behind your own debt servicing performances.
But eventually, just like in the financial world, there is a hard mathematical limit. Emotional bankruptcy happens when your minimum payments just can't cover the compounding interest anymore. When that internal structure finally collapses, the results are predictably brutal. You might experience a nervous breakdown, a sudden severe health crisis, or a complete identity collapse, and sometimes it's all three at once. Your biological system simply cannot sustain all those open loops any longer.
So, what's the way out? How do we stop this compounding interest and actually fix it? Well, the universal active ingredient across almost all successful therapeutic modalities is perspective. But hold on, not perspective in that toxic positivity, just look on the bright side or others have it worse kind of way. We are talking about perspective as a mechanical shift in vantage point. It means moving from being trapped entirely inside your story to stepping just an inch above it so you can finally objectively observe it.
And this brilliantly illustrates the biologically grounded framework our source provides to get this done, the 5 steps to clear emotional debt. We are going to walk through exactly how to make these shifts. We'll go from seeing the unconscious payments to naming them, finishing the physical responses, halting new debt, and finally, getting a witness to clear the ledger.
Okay, so steps 1 and 2 are all about closing the gap. First up, you have to actually see the payments consciously. The good news? You don't even need to remember your childhood trauma to do this. You just need to notice when you react disproportionately to a tiny trigger, or notice when simply resting feels dangerous to you. Next, you name your servicing behavior. Ask yourself, is your go-to move numbing, performing, controlling? The trick here is you don't judge it, and you don't even try to stop it right away. By simply explicitly naming it out loud, you create vital distance between yourself and the behavior. And as the source astutely points out, distance is exactly where all choice lives.
Moving on to step 3, finish what you started. This is about letting the body physically finish the movement it wasn't allowed to complete all those years ago. Remember, these are not memories. They are incomplete motor responses. They are subcortical states. So to clear them out, you absolutely need physical discharge. This involves practices like neurogenic tremors or structured breath work focusing on extended exhales, or even cold exposure. Listen, these aren't just passing wellness trends on social media. They are ancient, biologically grounded tools designed to expand your nervous system's window of tolerance so that trapped physical energy can finally leave your body.
And all of this builds to a realization that is absolutely vital to grasp. You will not ever think your way out of emotional debt. You have to feel your way out. It is biologically impossible to intellectualize your way out of a physiological state. If you try to process this from inside the emotional activation, your brain just swimming faster and faster trying to find a logical solution, you are literally just re-traumatizing yourself. You have to step out, observe, and let the physical body feel its way to completion. No shortcuts.
All right, step 4 is crucial. Stop taking on new debt. And the rule for this is shockingly simple. It's just 10 seconds. Every single time you feel the urge to choke down an uncomfortable emotion and say, "I'm fine," when you definitely aren't, you are swiping that emotional credit card again. Instead, just stop. Give the physical sensation 10 seconds to land. That's it. You don't have to understand it, you don't have to process it fully or have a breakthrough. You just have to notice it for 10 seconds. Because when your nervous system learns that feelings are finally allowed to just arrive, it stops storing them as debt.
And finally, step 5, get a witness. Think about it. Almost all emotional debt is originally created in isolation.
Even if there were a dozen people around you at the time, you were mentally alone with an event that was just too big for your capacity. That visceral feeling of aloneness is exactly what the system holds on to. So the discharge process actually requires a witness. But here's the big catch. This person's job is not to fix you. It's not to offer advice or reframe your pain into some beautiful life lesson. Their one and only job is to be a mirror, keeping you safe and holding space without flinching while the feeling naturally moves through you. Ending that isolation is what ultimately clears the ledger.
Wow, we have covered some truly profound ground today. We've looked at how our unexpressed emotions literally tax our biology, how they shape the very things we call our personalities, and how they dictate our daily habits. Look, you didn't choose to open this line of credit. It was opened for you by circumstances totally out of your control. But you are the one paying the heavy interest on it today. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought. Are you ready to shift your vantage point, look at your personality through a totally new lens, and finally stop paying that interest? Start observing, start naming, and let your body finally finish the loop. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will catch you on the next one.